After the French lost control of Acadia in 1710, the British, increasingly uncomfortable with the bond between the Acadians and the Mi'kmaq, went so far as to ban social interaction between the two groups. This leads me to the history of the extermination, complete and total extermination of the Beothuk people. I did find an interesting article written by Daniel and Paul. I will put the link in the video description. The European invasion of northeastern North America. In June 24th of 1497, John Cabot, who was a Knight Templar, by the way, I'm the one adding this to it, laid claim on behalf of England's King Henry VII to what thereafter would be called Newfoundland. The fact that the land was then owned and occupied by human beings, whose residency stretched back for millennia, was not viewed by Cabot or England as a legal impediment to this claim. In addition to appropriating another nation's land, Cabot's explorations revealed for future European exploitation the region's fabulously endowed fishing grounds. These events soon led to a full-scale European invasion of northeastern North America. In retrospect, the speed at which the news of the wealth of Newfoundland and North Atlantic fishing grounds spread around Europe in an age without mass communication seems incredible. This news spread so fast and proved so alluring that within a very short period of time, European fishermen began arriving en masse. By 1506, only 9 years after, the fishery was so large that the Portuguese government was taxing it. This uncontrolled and largely unpoliced foreign fishery would prove to be extremely bad news for the region's Amerindian peoples. In fact, the nature of the bad news was visited upon one Amerindian nation almost immediately. The intruders launched a murderous assault on Newfoundland's harmless and non-aggressive Beothuk, or red people. In retaliation for the crimes between commas they were committing by removing items such as nails from the fishermen's fish drying stations along the coast. As early as 1506, many of the Beothuk were being sold as slaves in Europe. Many were simply slaughtered. Also, the assault caused traditional food supplies to be cut off, which led to starvation and malnutrition and made them prime candidates for contracting European and indigenous diseases, which, because of their malnutrition state, almost always prove fatal. In time, these barbarities led to the extension of the tribe. The Beothuk spoke an Algonquian language, believed closely related to Mi'kmaq, and they and their ancestors had lived in what is now known as Newfoundland for thousands of years. They lived in small bands and lived off the abundant fisheries, shore birds, and land and sea mammals, especially caribou and seals. It has been reported that they herded caribou for slaughter into fenced areas, altogether an extremely healthy diet. Population estimates of the Beothuk, as always, when made from an Eurocentric point of view, which seems to be geared toward diminishing the extent of the crime against humanity committed against the indigenous people of the Americas by Europeans, goes from the ridiculous to the absurd. 500 to a few thousand might guesstimate, as they controlled a large landmass, would be somewhere in the vicinity of 25 to 50,000 at the onset of the invasion in 1497. This had to be the case after all, in spite of the ongoing efforts to exterminate them. It took 333 years to accomplish the genocide of the 1497 to 1829. The leadership offices of the nation was awarded to those who were honorable wise men. Decisions, as was the case for most North American First Nations, were by consensus. They were known as red people because they mixed a red dye and coated themselves and their belongings with it. Sharon O'Brien's take on the practice, the coating, which served as a symbol of tribal identity and initiation, may be the basis for the later European term redskins. The Mi'kmaq have been accused of being responsible for the extension of the Beothuk, which garbage is nothing but dehumanizing, demonizing European colonial propaganda. Some renegade members of the Mi'kmaq nation may have been employed by the British. It wouldn't be the first time that people whose country was at war with an enemy collaborated with that enemy to hunt the red people, but there is no evidence whatsoever that the Mi'kmaq leadership ever made a decision to exterminate any race of people, let alone a race of people that many now believe were closely related to them. Another factor which makes such an extermination alliance between the Mi'kmaq and the English unbelievable is the fact that the Mi'kmaq were engaged in a 130-year war with the British, a war that finally ended in 1761 at the governor's farm in Halifax, where the hatchet was buried and peace and friendship treaties were signed. The Mi'kmaq did traditionally go to Newfoundland to hunt and fish, and occasionally to help their French allies fight the English, and they often went to the island when their food supplies on the mainland became scarce from over-harvesting. And this article is written by Daniel and Paul. The following is quoted from a 1980 paper by Ralph T. Pastore, formerly a teacher of the Archaeology Unit and History Department of Memorial University of Newfoundland. Quote, prior to 1768, British naval governors and other officials took little notice of the Beothuks, probably because most Newfoundland settlers and migratory fishermen were little affected by them. In 1768, however, the naval governor Hugh Palliser sent Lieutenant John Cartwright up to exploit the Exploits River in an attempt to make contact with the remaining Beothuks and to draw them into a peaceful relationship with the English. Although Cartwright recorded numerous dwellings, he was unable to meet with any Indians. In some ways, Palliser was representative of a new spirit in the Atlantic world. Increasingly, some members of society had become concerned about the casualties of Western civilization. The anti-slavery movement, the movement to abolish judicial torture, and concern for the plight of native people were all part of this growing humanitarian impulse. Palliser himself was concerned not only about the condition of the Beothuks, but also about that of the Labrador Inuit. He requested that Moravian missionaries come to Labrador in part to help prevent conflict between whalers and fishermen on the one hand and the Inuit on the other. Unfortunately, this increased concern about the welfare of the Beothuks would have little real effect. In 1792, Captain George C. Pulling surveyed the English settlers on the northeast coast, collecting amounts of atrocities perpetrated against the Beothuks, and apparently submitted this report to a parliamentary committee, although nothing of substance came of this effort. A succession of governors, beginning with William Waldegrave in 1797, issued proclamations forbidding attacks on the Beothuks and offered rewards for making contact with the beleaguered people, but again with little positive result. The most substantial attempt to contact the Beothuks occurred in the winter of 1811, when Governor John Duckworth sent Lieutenant David Buchan up the Exploits River, accompanied with a small force of Marines. Buchan surprised a large Beothuk camp, whose occupants were probably paralyzed by fear. Buchan spent a short time with them, during which he tried to convince them that his intents were peaceful. Deciding to go back down the river for more presents, or he left 2 of his men behind as hostages. Unfortunately, when he returned, he found the camp deserted and his 2 men killed. It is probable that by the time the Beothuks had been so victimized that only the most extraordinary measures could have brought about a reconciliation between them and the settler population. In the years after the Buchan expedition, settler populations continued to encroach on what is being Beothuk territory, and the Beothuks continued to raid fishing premises and furriers' cabins for European goods. So I will put the link in the video description. I must stop reading here for now. Thanks for listening.